So this is the webinar of REL Northwest. REL Northwest's goal is to deepen collaboration and evidence use among educators and policymakers on important educational issues identified by regional stakeholders. Together, we are putting research into action. REL Northwest is one of 10 regional educational laboratories funded by the U.S. Department of Education. We partner with stakeholders in a 5-state region shaded in this map: Alaska, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, and Washington. The goals of this webinar are to review evidence on this topic, discuss how comprehensive scholarship and advising programs support first-generation student success from high school to college completion, and explore the elements of in-person and virtual advising models that provide personalized and comprehensive support. So my name is Michelle Hodera. I'm a researcher at REL Northwest, and I will be moderating this panel as well as introducing the research evidence. I'm going to have each of the speakers introduce themselves now.
Hello, I'm Pam Blumenthal. I'm the Director of Links Programs at Portland Community College.
Hello, I'm Joshua Laurie. I'm the Program Manager for Future Connect Scholarship at Portland Community College.
Hi, everybody. I'm Oscar Sweeten Lopez, and I manage our higher education initiatives at the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation.
Okay, so we're going to begin with some research on this topic. So first, let's look at some data about why this topic of supporting first-generation college students is so important. We know that a college education is a good investment. College graduates earn more and are less likely to be unemployed, and by 2020, an estimated 2/3 of job openings will require post-secondary education or training. But many students struggle with completing college, particularly students who are the first in their family to go to college or first to earn a college degree. Based on a nationally represented sample of 2003 college entrants, about 40% of college entrants had parents that did not attend college, and another 15% had parents with no degree. These percentages were nearly exactly the same among 2012 entrants. Across all college types, first-generation students have lower college completion rates. This graph displays college completion for a nationally representative sample of students who entered a public or private not-for-profit 4-year college or public 2-year college in 2003. These college types are the most common types of colleges that students attend. College completion is defined here as earning a certificate, associate's, or bachelor's degree. The green bar represents the 6-year completion rates of first-generation students, defined here as college students whose parents do not have a college degree. The blue bar represents the 6-year completion rates of students whose parents have a college degree. At 4-year colleges, the college completion gap between first-generation and non-first-generation students is nearly 20 points. The gap is smaller at community colleges, but completion rates are also lower. So why might first-generation students have lower college completion rates? Some of the skills or resources tied to college success include academic preparation, social and emotional learning or soft skills, navigating college or college knowledge, and financial resources. Students who are the first in their families to go to college may not have the same level of support or resources in these areas. We're not going to go into detail about all these areas, but I will give you one example. Financial resources can be a huge barrier for first-generation students who are much more likely to be low income. They're twice as likely as their non-first-generation counterparts to be Pell eligible. Let's look at some data on college costs. So first, I want to ask you a quick question. How much do you think the cost of tuition fees and room and board has risen at higher education institutions since 2000? Type in the chat if you think costs have doubled, costs have risen by 1/2, or costs have risen by 1/4. So you can just put A, B, or C. So those of you who answered B or are answering B are correct. Costs have risen by 1/2. So between the 2000-2001 academic year and 2014-15, prices for undergraduate tuition fees, room and board, at higher education institutions rose nearly 50%, or 49% to be exact, or by 1/2. The price increase was much larger in the public sector than the private sector, with prices in the public sector rising 57%. So we know that financial support for college is really important. I want to put out another first-generation students need to succeed in college. And you can type in the chat, and I see someone said advisors. That's what we're going to talk about today. Help with the FAFSA application, positive academic role models, guidance, emotional support, finances, mentoring, knowledge of financial aid, connections to community and campus life, mentoring and mental health support, definitely, college and TRIO advisors, development support. So these are all important. Tutoring, another one, that's key. Life skills. So a lot of what you're including is what we're going to talk about today and what's encompassed in these comprehensive programs we're going to feature. So comprehensive programs like the two featured today, Future Connect and the Dell Scholars Program, provide scholarships and other financial support, as well as many other services that address barriers to college access and achievement. We're going to briefly look at some of the data on 5 of these programs: Future Connect, City University of New York ASAP Accelerated Study and Associate Program, Ohio ASAP, Carolina Covenant, and Dell Scholars Program. So we're going to look at, I'm just going to describe these 5 programs because these 5 programs have had evaluations, and I'm going to show you in a second what the evaluations have found about their impact on college completion. So these 5 programs serve underrepresented college students, and they have few or no academic eligibility requirements. Only the Dell Scholars Program has a GPA cutoff of 2.4. These comprehensive programs provide a substantial amount of funding. Future Connect, CUNY ASAP, Ohio ASAP, and Carolina Covenant provide a scholarship to cover unmet financial needs, and the Dell Scholars Program scholarship is $20,000 over a student college career. And then many of these programs also cover textbooks, laptop computers, and other needs. And all 5 programs also provide ongoing individualized advising to help students navigate college and connect students to resources. They also provide things such as mentoring, peer networks, tutoring, and free college success and career workshops or courses, all of which attend to academic, social, and emotional needs. So I said that all the programs I just mentioned have had program evaluations that have used experimental or quasi-experimental methods. And when implemented well, these types of designs can provide evidence of a direct link between program participation and subsequent outcomes. The studies of these programs have found that they have had a relatively large effect on students' college success, including completion. For example, Future Connect raised 3-year completion rates by 9 percentage points, CUNY ASAP raised 3-year completion by 18 percentage points, Carolina Covenant raised 4-year completion by 8 percentage points, and the Dell Scholars raised 6-year completion by 16 to 19 percentage points. These are substantial gains in college completion. We know these gains are substantial because if we return to the data that we first looked at, what we find is that the Dell Scholars Program and Future Connect essentially close the completion gap for first-generation students, and they actually have slightly higher completion than non-first-generation students. So now I'm going to turn to the presenters and hear what they think about the evaluation findings of their own programs. So Josh, what evaluation findings have been most surprising for you?
For us, the most surprising findings have been the data around the barriers our students face on a daily basis. While we are encouraged by our program outcomes and measurements, we are surprised to see that 1 in 4 students within Future Connect experience food insecurity, and 1 in 6 are faced with housing insecurity on a regular basis. Despite these barriers, Future Connect students are thriving on many accounts. Fall-to-fall persistent rates increased by 14%, and completion rates for Future Connect are 9 percentage points higher than comparable groups.
Thank you, Josh. And Oscar, which evaluation findings have been most important?
Yeah, no, there's been a lot of wealth of information that's come out of that. I think ultimately when we looked at the findings and we looked at our program model, it really boiled down to the types of contacts and the intensity of the contacts that we were able to achieve in a virtual model with all of our Dell Scholars. So I think taking a look at, again, the amount of effort and time that it takes, even in a virtual context, to try to really replicate that kind of an in-person, counseling and support model has been key for us. And so being able to track not only the types of issues that students are facing, but then the amounts of contacts and supports that they're getting around those issues has been a great way for us to be able to evaluate the interventions that we've done with our students.
Thank you, Oscar. So now Pam and Josh are going to speak about the Future Connect program.
Thanks, Michelle. Before we get into details about the program, I'd like to start with a little history of Future Connect. The program started in 2011 as an idea between the mayor of Portland and our then PCC president. Both were first-generation college graduates themselves, and they wanted to create a direct pathway from high school to college for Portland students. Not just a scholarship program with money, but with intensive individualized supports as well. This image that you see now is the evolution of our program over the last 6 years. With us starting in 2011 with 144 students, and last week we our 7th cohort started, and now we have nearly 2,000 students that we've supported since 2011. Future Connect is focused on students who would otherwise not be considering college. We have no GPA requirements, and our students often face multiple barriers to getting into college and staying. Many of our students, as Josh mentioned, struggle with homelessness and food insecurity. Many others speak a language other than English at home. Most of our students take at least one remedial course when they enter PCC. As you can see from this pathway on your screen, our program has evolved over the years. Those circles represent the number of students we've served in each cohort from 2011 through 2016. We've been adding on and learning as we go, adding more staff, creating new supports, leadership opportunities, internships, interns, more coaches, as we've been trying to be responsive to what our students need as we've learned. This program has been created through unique partnerships, and we continue to evolve and bring new partners into the mix. We now partner with 3 cities, including Portland, and 1 county to fund the program. The PCC Foundation raises funds to match the city and county contributions, and we've also received state funding twice to support our work. We set out with the intention of improving college retention and completion rates for first-generation low-income students coming directly out of high school. Our goal was to have at least 70% fall-to-fall retention and 50% completion or transfer within 3 years. We have hit the fall-to-fall retention rate with every cohort, and we have not yet hit 50% within 3 years, but each cohort is getting stronger. And as Michelle mentioned, we are increasing completion rates for students that otherwise wouldn't have an option, wouldn't have a chance in community college setting. We're really seeing that we're making a strong impact. the next slide, we're able to talk a little bit about the components of Future Connect. So as I mentioned, our students are coming directly out of high school, and we start with outreach, and that's a key component to what we do. We have one outreach staff who is connected to over 65 high schools and community-based organizations. She works with high school counselors and seniors in the fall of their senior year. Students complete a FAFSA and an application, and then students are accepted in the spring and they meet their coach. And then over the summer, they are continued to engage with their coach, and they attend a one-day workshop, and their coach is helping them register for classes and get all financial aid issues addressed, so that by the time September comes around, they're all set and ready to go. The core of Future Connect is the College Success Coach, and Josh is going to go into a lot more detail about that role and what our coaches are doing. Our coaches are teaching, so every year students have the opportunity to take college success classes and career development classes that are provided tuition-free and taught by their coach. Of course, the scholarship is key, as financial barriers are huge for our students. Students get a minimum of $600 up to $3,000 depending on their financial need, and we support undocumented students as well as DACA students in our program. We also have leadership opportunities, and those are growing every year. We have about 100 students take an intercultural leadership class taught by coaches, and then they are also able to become speakers in the community. They are eligible for internship opportunities, and we're also helping support them transfer to universities after they are finished at PCC. So now I'm going to turn it over to Josh, and he's going to talk in a little more detail about the coaching aspect of Future Connect.
Thank you, Pam. As Pam mentioned, the coach is really the key component of Future Connect, and my goal is to really share about all the different components that the coach does and kind of take a deep dive into 4 basic elements of coaching and how we work alongside our students. So one of the first key facets of Future Connect is this early connection we spoke about to the program, the coach, and the college. Since our students are first generation or low income, and many are not necessarily thinking about college prior to their senior year, our scholarship really targets students who are not high-achieving students necessarily in high school, and as Pam mentioned, we do not have a GPA requirement. We want these students to get connected, though, to us early and see the value in what supports we are going to provide. The early connection allows for obviously a rapid relationship building and opportunities throughout the summer to connect to other students from similar backgrounds who live in the same region. So to give you kind of an overview of Portland Community College, we cover a regional footprint of about the size of Rhode Island, and we have 4 campuses serving just over 80,000 students across all those campuses. This setting can make it even more challenging at times for students to feel connected to the college. Our primary goal is creating a sense of belonging and early connection to students. Without a residential hall or campus living on site, our students additionally lack the connection to the institution. We want to use this early connection as a means to connect students to others, like themselves, and create a strong sense of cohort. During the summer months, students are invited on campus for these all-day orientations, as Pam mentioned, and we discuss things such as financial aid, financial literacy, registration for fall term, and just the general connection to the campus itself. This next slide specifically talks about how coaches are also advisors. When the student registers for their first class here on campus, they do that with their coach. Being trained as an advisor allows for our students to do the primary advising for students. Coaches are also receiving financial aid training through our advisors. This cross-training allows for students to get their needs met in one place and removes unneeded extra steps for students who often have overlapping demands in both areas. The coach is working with about 125 students at any one time on a caseload, and those students are coming in for meetings with a coach in person, face-to-face, weekly, monthly, or term-to-term, depending upon the specific needs of that student. Upon entry, a coach typically sets up a term-by-term plan for the student based on area of study and develops an online map for the student to work towards completing their specific certificate or degree goals within a 2- or 3-year timeline. Coaches are also part-time instructors. To form a full first-year experience, the program pays for tuition for 2 sections of guidance classes within the student's first term and second term. The first-term coaches teach our CG100, which is college guidance built on developing soft skills relevant to college success and the growth mindset. During the winter term, coaches teach a CG130, which is today's careers class. That's built around helping students to identify work and towards specific career goals or fields. Both classes are created with the idea of strengthening the cohort model through the first 2 terms and developing a strong community of students who often do not connect to the community college model. We have a third class too in spring, which is optional for students, and it's built around leadership development. Students may opt into these if they show interest in the community development, service leadership, or social justice. We serve about 100 students starting from that 300 within these final leadership courses. Coaches come to Future Connect with master-level background in education, counseling, social work, psychology, or social sciences. And in this picture, you can even see some of our students holding our most recent book that we created. Within the first 3 years, we discovered the cost of our books for students we were asking them to take was nearly $100 per term. So our response with our coaches as instructors was to create an open education resource book and print it for free. We gave it to our students for free, and now the cost of savings over the last 2 years is just over $80,000 to their communities. This is just one unique way in how coaches have worked as instructors to benefit our students. The final piece of the coach is really the resource advocate. Connecting to a coach as a resource is key. Being a coach means maintaining many different access points to the student's plan, that being financial aid, housing, resources already in the community. Often our coaches are access points to community resources since many of our students are experiencing housing displacement or food insecurity as they work towards college completion. By the time they apply to our program, many Future Connect students may already have several case managers, advocates, or community resources that they have bumped into while in high school. We try to work as best we can with all of these resources to make sure our students know the school is their support. We're there to support them and work alongside these partners. It's not uncommon for students to turn to the coach when housing, food, or family needs come up as well. While some of our coaches have backgrounds in counseling, we refer out to our campus counselors to support students when more clinical needs arise. Students often find cup of noodles, granola bars, bus tickets in each office, and coaches work for the college but interface with the community in a variety of ways as they work to support these students. These 4 components are really how we approach the support for specific high-needs, first-generation, low-income students within Future Connect. And I hope this kind of highlights how we look at coaching within our program.
Thank you, Josh. Now we're going to take questions from the audience. You can use the Q&A feature located in the bottom right corner of the screen, and please ask all panelists. So before we, so the first question we're going to field to Pam and Josh is from a pre-submitted question, and it's, what are the most important issues for which first-generation college students need assistance in your view?
From my perspective, from our perspective working with students, I think there's two areas here. One, there's kind of the navigation of college, right? So it's the financial aid, admissions, registration, counseling, access to counseling, and access to accommodations. That's one bucket area, I'd say. But a larger one is we feel major issues first-generation college students face is just how to develop a sense of belonging. And specifically for us, it's how do we do that at an institution where students aren't within a residential living situation like many of our 4-year institutions have. So we really want to develop a sense of belonging for those students early before they step foot on campus.
Thank you. Another pre-submitted question was, how do I, as a university staff member, ensure that I'm meeting the unique needs of the first-generation college students I work with while also ensuring that each student doesn't feel separated from the population or targeted due to their situation?
Yeah, Josh and I had a conversation about this, and I think, again, reiterating that sense of belonging. So in a, depending how large the class is or what the context is for the university staff, I think that whatever you can do to be approachable, whether it's how you put language into your syllabus, I think really understanding where students are coming from, being aware of their preferred pronouns and what they want to be called is another way of kind of the inclusiveness. Also inclusive curriculum, really using equity lens to evaluate what the textbooks you're choosing. I think there's a variety of ways to look at that to make sure that without singling out students that you're really trying to reach everybody as much as possible, and then kind of the cooperative learning opportunity to really try to bring students into the learning process instead of being, as an instructor, the person with all of the answers, to really look at what you can learn from the students and have them feel like that there's an approachability there. What we find with our students is that they, many of them don't feel like they belong, and they're waiting for a reason to have that proven right. And so we try to mitigate that by developing relationships and making sure they understand that they absolutely belong in a post-secondary environment.
Okay, so I'm seeing a few more questions. So we have a few questions around more on the background of the coaches. If the coaches are faculty, are they students? Can you say more about the coach background?
Yeah, so I think it's a very unique cross-pollinated position. They're academic professionals within the college, and then they receive a part-time faculty stipend to teach these classes. And so they actually swim in two different worlds, and they're connected to the different subject area committees on campus. So we're actually quite connected to the college guidance faculty as well as the DE faculty, mostly for our students in general in terms of when they enter.
Thank you. And then there's another question about funding. How do you sustain funding year after year? Where does the funding come from?
Yeah, it's a ongoing issue, but as I said, our city partners come with us, so we kind of negotiate and are connected to right now the cities of Beaverton, Hillsborough, and Portland, and so they are funding half of the program, the costs, and then our foundation and our college are always looking for grants. We also have individual donors that we are very connected to and local businesses. So it's a close relationship that both Josh and I have with our foundation in sustaining the program. And we also, as I said, have received state funding, so we're connected at the state level as well, and trying to create the sustainability. And although it sounds like it's a whole mix of different things, which can be very complicated, that's true. And yet, by having so many different people in it, it creates a certain level of stability in that nobody will, we would hope nobody would want to pull out, because we have a lot of different people at the table that take ownership of the program and are really engaged, not just in the financial part. We didn't really talk about this, but like our city partners are providing internships to our students, so they really get to know personally what they're paying for, and they're really interested in diversifying their workforce and being very connected to the students that they're supporting.
Okay, and there's another question around what obstacles you face getting disparate units on board with a student's plan.
I'm not sure I understand exactly what that means. Like different people within the college, maybe, who have, sorry, do you know what that means?
Maybe it means outside of the college itself, so maybe I alluded to the fact that there are many different individuals that are involved in a student's plan before they come to us. So for instance, a student who may be in foster care may have an independent living program coordinator already connected to them before they come to us. So I think obviously, there's issues of FERPA, so we have to protect the students' confidentiality when they come on campus, and we let students know up front that that is our job, and if they do have other individuals that are connected to their plan, or if they have other case managers, that we're willing to be involved, but we have to go through the kind of the FERPA steps. And then oftentimes what we find is those individuals have the similar goal, right? The student is successful, and the student is a successful college student. And so if we can share information and support the student, they oftentimes get on board. And it's not uncommon that we are having cross-departmental meetings inside the college and outside the college with partners and stakeholders regarding one student specifically, so we can coordinate services.
Okay, so we're going to take a couple more questions. We're going to take one around how do coaches and advisors communicate with the advising department at the campus at large? How do you achieve cross-department cooperation?
Well, I think that goes back to one of our biggest pieces is really tagging students necessarily within our databases who may have been may have trouble in their first term, and so we may work with specific faculty around identifying best practices around those individual students. So we try and work closely with specific faculty in the subject area committees. And then also our coaches are embedded in the advising structure of the college at large. So we're both developing curriculum for and policies that work within the college. So while we may be serving a specific subset of general PCC students, we're actually embedded in all of the policies and procedures at the college. So any advisor track or any systems that we're using at the college, our coaches are using them as well.
The last question is we're going to ask is around transfer, which is so important, and we know the community college to university transfer process can be such a challenge. So how do you help students transfer to university?
So we have a new position. It's been with us for about a year, transfer specialist. So it started actually as a bachelor's of social work intern. It was actually one of our former students who came in and developed a process to support students in transferring, and then we created a position. And so she is working as students approach having enough credits to transfer. She is meeting with students, so the coaches refer to her, and she is very knowledgeable about the requirements. She's connecting to local universities as well as universities around the country. And we have also some MOUs with local universities where they're providing transfer scholarships specific to Future Connect students. We have a relationship with Portland State and then 2 private universities, Lewis and Clark and Pacific. So our students can get most, if not all, of their next 2 years of college paid for to get them to a bachelor's degree. We have over 40 of those scholarships now, and they're growing. So this is really, when we started out, we didn't know we would be necessarily reaching down into the high schools, and we didn't know that we would be doing the transition as well. But we've seen how comprehensive we need to be to make sure our students get in the door effectively and then across that finish line to a bachelor's degree if that's their goal.
All right, thank you so much, Pam and Josh. We're going to move on to Oscar, and he's going to speak about the Dell Scholars Program.
Hey, well, thanks, Michelle. And again, thank you guys, first of all, for inviting me to participate. And so glad that there's such a lively group of folks on the webinar. Again, just to reintroduce myself quickly, Oscar Sweeten Lopez at the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation. So we're the family foundation of Michael Dell, who folks know through Dell Inc., but we are completely separate from the corporation. We started the Dell Scholars Program back in 2004. And the charge that we were given by our founders was, we really want to identify a group of students who are being overlooked basically right now by some of your more traditional scholarship programs. So we knew that obviously financial need was a major obstacle for our students, and we wanted to be able to support that through the award, but we didn't want to just select students that were, really high-achieving, low-income students, just because there's already a lot of programs that focus on that. And so when we took a look at, kind of the landscape and where we thought we could have the most impact, we really recognize that there is a large group of students who are low income. We identify them in terms of their need based on their Pell Grant eligibility coming into their first year of college. And these students are those that are academically prepared. They're not necessarily at the top of their class, if you will. They're more kind of in that academic middle. Our minimum GPA for students to apply coming out of high school is a 2.4 GPA. And so these are students that are kind of in that BC average range. And we saw that those students were getting overlooked, really, by more of the traditional scholarship programs. And so that was our focus. Nationally, these students are only completing, as we saw, way behind the national average. So for students specifically coming out of high school, proposing to get a 4-year degree, roughly around 22 to 25% of those students will complete that degree within that 6-year time period. Our goal for our Dell Scholars was to achieve an 85% completion rate. We're getting closer. We're right now in aggregate across all of our classes at 79%. We do have some individual cohorts that have gotten to the 83, 84% range. So we feel like we're definitely doing well, and we've learned a lot over the years. And so our program began in 2004 with 90 Dell Scholars, and now we have over 3,000 students that have been selected into the program. As you can see, primarily students are first in their family to go to college. Average income is around $27,000 a year for a family of 4, and we're just nearly at 2,000 graduates, 1,800 graduates so far since we compiled this information. And you can see the distribution in terms of ethnicity as well of our students. All right, so just briefly a little bit on the process of becoming a Dell Scholar. We are getting ready here in about a month, less than a month now, to open up our selection process for the next cohort. And so we run that basically through November and January. We then select semifinalists who are then identified and have to submit additional information. We have our selection committee review those applications and score those, and we announce every year our Dell Scholar cohort in April. Last year we were able to select 400. This year we're going to anticipate selecting 500 Dell Scholars. So we're really excited about continuing to be able to scale the program year on year. All right, so when you become a Dell Scholar, one of the main messages that we want to get to our students is that this is much more than a check. We obviously began by recognizing the financial need and the cost of college. The increase in the cost of college, as we saw earlier, is a huge barrier for a lot of students. And so we do provide a $20,000 total award. So students can access up to $5,000 of that per year. And often we'll request a little bit less in their beginning years, and then we'll, as they have other sources of aid coming in, other smaller scholarship programs. But we're approximately the equivalent of another Pell Grant, if you will, for a student. So it is significant for sure, but depending on their college choice and their financial aid award package, this may or may not, fill that unmet need that they have for themselves. So in addition, we do provide them with a laptop computer so that they can stay connected. You'll see why here in a bit because of the virtual aspect of the program and the technology that we use. We wanted to make sure that there was no barriers there. And then also related to the textbooks, like our colleagues at Future Connect, we saw that the cost of textbooks is huge, and so we started to provide actually a partnership with a company here, Powell's Books out of Portland, and then have recently, or over the last few years, transitioned to Chegg, only because they also offer tutoring and other supports. And so we get students textbook and actually now tutoring and academic support through Chegg, Chegg.com. Another great resource for students that we found. But ultimately, we really want folks to know that this is much more than a check. And so we have students spread out across the country, and we strive to build those relationships with our students as quickly as we can because it's imperative that we do have, even though it's not an in-person model, we're not on campus where students can drop in and connect with us, we try to be just as accessible as if we were in that kind of a setting. And so we have to begin early in April to connect with our students, let them know what to expect as being a Dell Scholar and being part of the program. and get going right away on supporting them. So let me spend a little bit of time then really to break down, in essence, what the approach is, or kind of what our theory of action is for the program. And so as I mentioned, we're engaging students in April at the end of their senior year in high school, and we really have found that, supporting them through the transition from high school to college is key. A lot of research around summer melt, students that are intending to be enrolled in the fall that end up melting away for various reasons. So we focus a lot of our time and attention. Kind of one of the first things that we start working with them on is, have you decided where you're going to go to school? Have you received your financial aid award letter from that school? And, usually before that kind of May 1 deadline to decide where they're going to go, we're trying to help them compare award letters, helping them really understand, is this a good fit financially? Is it a good fit, culturally, from an academic perspective? And so we get started right away. But ultimately, what we have hypothesized and what the evaluation is helping to demonstrate, we're having positive results in, is that our focus really is that transition period through that second year of college. And so we felt that if we could get students to year 3 with, we said 80% of their progress towards their degree. So if they could be at least 80% of the way of where they needed to be in terms of completing that degree by year 3, that they would be more likely to succeed and finish, within that 6-year mark. So that's our focus. So more of our attention is paid, at that critical time frame. So a lot of the research shows first-year persistence, year 1 to year 2 persistence is a key indicator. We definitely are tracking that as well, but we've also added year 2 to year 3 persistence, and then again the quality of that persistence. So if a student is even persisting into year 3, but they are on academic probation, they're behind in credits, they're still struggling to pay for school, then that's not good, and that's a scenario that we think, could again be a reason why they may not be able to complete in time or stop out altogether. So throughout that time period, we are collecting different information on the students, and that's really what we wanted to focus on today is in this virtual model, how do we paint the picture, if you will, of what's going on with our students since we don't have them coming in and visiting with us, we don't have them in a classroom setting. How quickly are we able to start to, build that relationship with those students, collect the information or the data that is going to help us get on track, and then how do we do this at scale? One thing that I did mention earlier is that for those active students, approximately about 1,800 active Dell Scholars at over 600 colleges and universities, we have only a team of 3 advisors and some part-time interns in the summer. So we've had to create a high engagement program model and deliver that, virtually and deliver that at scale. So we've worked hard and are proud of where we've been able to get to so far. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time here on the technology that really is kind of the underpinning or the enabling factor for us to be able to execute on that specific type of model. So I mentioned data, and we were talking a little bit earlier before the webinar as well, how I think often that word can create a lot of anxiety or stress in those of us that are supporting students or being asked to collect and track a certain amount of data. I really want to, kind of bring that to the essence of what we're trying to accomplish, which is painting a picture and understanding what's happening with each of those students. And so to do that, we definitely need to collect information about those students, whether it's their academic progress, their financial aid packaging, cost of attendance, and then also, what's happening with them outside of school, what we call the life happens factors. Okay, so one of the main ways that we collect this information is by surveying our Dell Scholars. So there is a student-facing portal that they're able to log into. We can assign both the transition type surveys that we do when they're coming out of high school to help support them through that summer period and avoid summer melt, to end-of-term check-ins as well as annual check-ins that we send out to those students. Because we don't have a relationship with a particular university, we're not trying to get the data directly from the school, we are relying on the students to log in and complete that information for us. And so, you know, we're able to, through our portal, be able to track who started, who hasn't started, you know, and be able to see exactly where students are in that data collection process. So collecting the data is great, and we've been able to do that since day one when we began the program back in 2004. But one of the things that we saw early on that I think is often something that happens to most of us is, you know, distilling ultimately what is the most important parts of that data, or how do you make that data work for you? How do you make that actionable? So up here I have just a slide that illustrates what we call our academic or our automated student risk indicator. So as those students are completing these surveys, we've categorized that information really into three broad buckets. They're, you know, again, their academic performance, their financial aid, and then that situational experience, or what's happening with them outside of school. And so depending on how they're answering those questions, the system, and we've gone in there and we've put in logic and programmed that logic into the system to be able to score a level of risk, and also, as you can see in red, and I know it's a little bit small there on the screen potentially, but we're highlighting things in red like work hours, their mindset score, number of dependents that they may have, obviously things like unmet need, types of loans, EFC. So depending on when they get below a certain threshold, that data will also turn red when we know that, you know, that's kind of at a critical area, or critical point. So we collect that information, and then that's what allows us to run a lot of queries and reports on the back end to say, okay, let's look at different profiles of our students. Let's take a look at all of our students that have a GPA below this threshold, that also have financial, you know, potentially unmet need challenges, if their unmet need is above maybe $2,000 or $3,000, or we can just hone in on students that are having to work, you know, more than 20 hours a week. And so then that allows us to go in there and prioritize what is happening with our students, and then kind of what kind of outreach and support do we need to be providing for those students. So getting the data in, making that data actionable is a kind of a key foundation. But then, you know, once, like any relationship or any kind of partnership that you have, you need to be able to have effective communication, and we need to be able to track that communication. So here's just an example of how in the system, you know, if we email a student, we're probably not going to get a very timely response, but if we text message them, they're going to be more likely to respond to us, you know, usually right away. Or they're just texting us as well. And so the system that we're using, which is something that we built, you know, within the foundation to operate the program, integrates text messaging, you know, email, and all of that then is automatically logged in what we call their latest happenings, or basically their contact log. If we have an open intervention with a student, so we're trying to help them overcome a very specific issue, we can associate text messages and emails along that. And so this is really work that's happening, whether it's happening virtually or in person. These are the relationships, you know, the kinds of interactions and contacts that we're having with students. And so just being able to capture that information is what allows a very small team of us to, you know, really implement what we call kind of a collective case management model. And so what I mean by that is when I have to call AT&T, usually for some issue with my internet, you know, and I talked to them 2 weeks ago, I talked to a different customer service representative, and I had to basically lay out my whole story of what was going on, and so then this was what was supposed to happen to get the issue resolved. Well, it's still not resolved, so I need to call back. The last thing that I want to have to do is explain my entire story all over again. And so by being able to capture those contacts and those engagements, those interactions in a centralized and localized platform, anybody on the team is able to step in and help support those students, you know, with whatever that issue is. So I'm out of town right now. I'm lucky to be here in Portland with the folks here, and so the team, you know, back at the office is able to step in and you know, pick up where I left off with, you know, with the students that I've been working with. And so it allows, again, for us to collectively, as a small team, provide that high engagement support to our students. The other thing that we're able to do within the system, and that's important, is that, again, that these are relationships, right? And so There's a lot of work that has to happen both on our end as a program, what are we committing to do to help support that student, but then also what is the student committing to do to help support themselves and be advocates for themselves. And so, you know, we may need to assign a task to a student, so we may need to have that student maybe upload a copy of their degree audit as we're verifying that, yes, they seem to be on track to transfer from the community college over to the four-year. And so, you know, we're going to assign a task. The student is going to, from their portal, see the task and then be able to respond to that task. And so we have a, you know, basically a workflow management system that allows us to keep all of that work, you know, all of that follow-up that needs to take place with the students organized in a comprehensive place. Even though we are virtual, though, we definitely get out and try to either do workshops or webinars for our Dell Scholars, or we spend a lot of time getting out of the office and going on campus and visiting students, particularly where we have high enrollments of students. And so you can see here that we're able to quickly be able to create an event, invite students to that event. The students can RSVP. We can then track what students came to the event, which students didn't come to the event. And that's just another, you know, contact point with the program. And so, you know, when we have tasks that we're assigning, when we have events that we're inviting students to, the surveys that we're asking them to complete, we're also, you know, over time able to really start to kind of, you know, build what we would call kind of an engagement score for that student. How well are they participating in the program? How proactive are they being about being involved and, you know, and kind of managing their own success? All right, and then the last thing that I'll touch on is, you know, again, kind of going back to that collective case management approach, is creating a very comprehensive profile of that student. So here you can see that we can quickly, at a glance, take a look at their, you know, progress towards their degree. We can look at things like their cumulative GPA, and you can see that trending over time, what that GPAs look like, their credit hours. We're looking at their financial information, so we can quickly, you can see there's an overlay there of a graph that shows cost of attendance in red compared to their sources of aid. We would always love for the two lines to always be on top of one another, because that would indicate that the aid is matching the cost of attendance, but whenever the cost is higher and the aid is lower, you'll see that there's a gap there. So again, another you know, best practice for us in our program and in our model is to be able to synthesize and have that information really at our fingertips, you know, quickly, so that, you know, we don't have to be digging through a lot of different places, you know, within one system or various systems to try to piece together the picture of what's happening with that student. All right, well, the last thing that I want to mention, and then I think we'll have a little bit of time for some questions, is that, you know, just like my partners here at PCC and their program, it is about the relationships, and it is about, you know, those coaches, and in our case, the advisors. So I focused a lot on the technology. I focused a lot on the data that we're collecting, but none of that is going to be as successful if you don't have the right people that are trained and able to execute, you know, the approach that we have in the model. And so it really ultimately comes down to making things like the technology and the data, you know, making that a key enabler for our coaches, our advisors, to then be able to know what's going on with our students, know how to prioritize how they're doing, and then being able to, you know, develop our persistence and success strategies to support all of those students collectively.
Okay, thank you, Oscar. So now we have a little bit of time for questions. So again, please use the Q&A feature located in the bottom to ask questions for Oscar. And we're going to start with some pre-submitted questions. So first, Oscar, how has the virtual support model been successful in supporting low-income minority and first-generation students, specifically during their first year?
Sorry, can you repeat that again? I just want to make sure.
How has the virtual support model been successful in supporting low-income minority and first-generation students during their first year?
Yeah, one of the things that we found, you know, that, again, we were trying to find out kind of what's our place and what's our role. Students that are coming out of high school are, you know, we would hope that they're going to have some kind of an advisor or somebody else following them along or helping them. The summer melt issues are really ultimately attributed to, just a lack of knowledge and understanding and not having the right kinds of supports in terms of, your own family members, others that have gone to college to help guide you. So particularly in that first year, being there to support students through the transition period and being, there really as that gap. We're kind of the bridge between what kinds of resources might they have at their high schools and the programs that they're involved in their high schools. So a lot of our students are in TRIO programs, Gear Up, Upward Bound. They're in AVID or other types of, college readiness type programs. But once those programs end and before they get connected to great programs like Future Connect or others on their campuses, there's kind of a gap there. And so us being able to step in and fill that role has been kind of a key part of what we've seen, in that first year for our students.
Great. So I've seen some clarifying questions around where the data is coming from. Are students self-reporting everything?
So the students, there's a few ways that the data is coming. Primarily the students are self-reporting, and we are asking them to upload their transcript as well, or grade report really, as well as their financial aid award letter, student aid report, and so all of that data is verified. So once a student completes a survey, we have a whole workflow of where we can open up, the transcript, compare it to what they entered, and very rarely, do we ever see that there's any kind of misrepresentation. There may be some slight discrepancies that we're able to adjust. The other way that we get data into the system is through the National Student Clearinghouse. So if a student is not engaged with us, we can, at the very least, through the clearinghouse, be able to see, what their current enrollment is, what school are they currently at. And then staff can always enter the data directly into the system on behalf of the student. So if the student emails you their transcript or just tells you what's going on and they didn't enter it themselves, then an advisor or one of our coaches is able to put that information into the system as well.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question, and then maybe the remaining questions we can answer in after the webinar. But so one question we have is that the program's talked about having financial incentives, but for programs with smaller budgets, how do you incentivize advising or support to get students to recognize its value?
Well, I can start off, and I think maybe this is one we can both answer. Again, it's relationship building. Even with the scholarship award, there's still some students that struggle to complete the check-ins or participate in the program until we're able to really establish a relationship with them. And so, the student ultimately has to see value in being part of the program. And so there's many different approaches, and so depending on, your particular circumstances, your scenario, the strategies to accomplish that can take different forms, but ultimately I think it boils down to you have to build relationships, and in those relationships, students have to feel that they are, getting value out of this. And when that happens, even aside from the incentives, students are going to want to continue to participate. They're, going to want to drop by your office and stop in and say hello, or just check in with us on Facebook, as many of them do, because they feel connected and engaged with the program. And so I don't want to minimize that incentives are important, and financial incentives definitely help, but it's not the only factor. Even with the incentives, we still have to build relationships with our students.
Okay, so we're out of time, but you can also learn more about the programs featured today at the following websites, or email me for information about the research evidence, and we'll notify you via email when a recording of this webinar is available. So thank you so much to the presenters, Josh, Pam, and Oscar. Thank you all for listening, and that's a wrap.
Thank you.